kind of a sad thing about how we're educated is that it introduces us to competition, with the grades and all. And, there's plenty of people who've talked about all this stuff. Like, that's kind of a bad idea. And the other thing is it tends to set up this authoritarianism, and a whole lot of intelligent, imaginative people decide, sometime in their early life to resist authoritarianism because, it's not a natural state, and some kids may like it, but most don't, and so learning from people becomes a power relationship. And I think that's really destructive to enjoying learning. Speaking personally from it, I resented the hell out of teachers dictating to me from positions of knowledge, not because it was hard for me to accept that they knew things that I didn't. I always actually liked learning things, but because it was done, in this framework of I am more powerful than you because I know things that you don't know. Power is knowledge, and that stupid stuff. Power isn't knowledge. Power is just power, and knowledge is just knowledge. And knowing things is really a good thing, and learning things is really a good thing. And that setup, with the authority figure dictating, to the powerless what they should know and testing them on it and grading them on their ability to do it, sort of pollutes that whole idea of learning things, it sort of took me a while to overcome, really by my first year of high school, I wanted nothing to do with it. And I had no respect for what I was being taught because of the way it was being taught, because I had no respect for the authoritarian model with which it was presented. Not wise enough at, 14, 15, whatever, to separate the knowledge from the system it was presented by. So, so I didn't get much out of school, and I think that happens to a lot of people. Being interested in learning, I went other places to find things to learn, and looked at other people, writers, musicians, older people hanging out on the street, kind of. I went there for my teachers, and kind of ignored school. And I have a feeling that that kind of teaching goes much farther. The kind that you pick up because you want it, and the kind that you pick up because it's not associated with that, where it's kind of, peer-to-peer in a way, and that we teach one another, and, we're able to learn from everyone and anyone, and I think that's an important idea to have, and an important quality of mine to face the world with. You know, anybody that you encounter, you know, has something to teach you, and so it's kind of on you to make something out of that, you know, is to understand. It doesn't mean like, because it's not authoritative, it means you can take it as, you can go, boy, is that wrong, you know, that's still learning. Or you can say, that's sort of a fair point, maybe I should adjust my thinking around other things, because, you know, whatever person I learned this from has different experience from me, and you know, I have no idea what it's like to have been them and to have had their experience, so I should maybe have some receptivity to what they drew from their experience, because I haven't had that. Anyhow, so in music I kind of went that way. I liked whatever wasn't in the book, you know, and the book was Bach, Mozart, Beethoven, basically, you know, music class in those days. It was either that, or it was kind of like Broadway shows, you know, which, you know, really, like, Broadway shows are just kind of more direct versions of 19th century Euro music. It's the same sort of chord sets. They're put into more readily accessible forms, but there's like almost no musical difference between, you know, the Gershwins and Jerome Kern and stuff like that, than there is between, you know, than there is in Beethoven or Chopin or what have you. You know, they use the same devices and it's the same system, and anyway, that was sort of the platform of music as it was presented academically, so I kind of made a point of learning it elsewhere. Interestingly enough, I kind of ended up learning that stuff that I would have learned in music class and the harmony books. I end up learning that more through Charlie Parker and bebop and Sonny Rollins and like that. You know, that was my doorway into that. I listened to them and I said, man, this shit's awesome, and like, ooh, how do these chords work? And that's sort of what, on a really kind of exhaustive, you know, studious way, taught me Western harmony. And it's obvious why, you know, because there's just, to me, a hell of a lot more vitality and you know, Bird and Sonny than there is in, you know, than there is in hearing somebody caterwauling out some show tunes or caterwauling out some opera, or, you know, or just, you know, you know, playing rigid rhythms in the classical style, you know. Anyhow, along with that, I also wanted to learn from, it took me a while to come around to it, is what I mean, is that I kind of listened to anything before that, and I kind of got to be around, like 19 or 20, and I started to really like things, and, you know, Bartok really got to me first, you know, but by implication, you know, Bartok like opened me up to listening to Stravinsky and Berg and Debussy, and, you know, well, I always liked him, but yeah, it sort of opened that portal to me, and because that had stuff that wasn't in the, you know, like Sonny Rollins never played anything that sounded like Bartok or Berg, or Stravinsky. And so then you had to go to the source. And by then I'd been out of school a while, so I didn't feel as oppressed by that relationship. It was voluntary on my part rather than, regurgitate whatever authority was telling me. And over time, I realized I like to learn from everything, everybody. Part of this project in orchestra is that anyone who comes into it has their own kind of backstory, whatever you want to call it, and they'll go about certain ways of playing, and they're all interesting, even if it doesn't end up sounding good. It gives you a chance to find out what is somebody trying to do here, and what are they hearing, and why did they do that? That's always interesting, and it's always worth investigating. And so I found it's been very fruitful to my education, having people play and thinking about why they do what they do and what kind of approaches. It helps, like with building instruments. You see somebody try to play something a certain way, and even if they can't do it, well, then it would be good to build something that someone can approach this way. Or you see somebody trying to get something out of this, and it's kind of set up or designed to do something else, and you think, oh, that would be a good thing to make, So I don't know, the point I want to go around about all this is that there's always opportunities to learn, and learning is always good. It's just the real thing to get over is that our schooling basically teaches us to resist to learning a little bit, and to find out the hypocrisies in it, and kind of go at it in this essentially negative, critical way. I know I sure did that, high school right through what would have been my college years. If I'd been that, you can undermine anything by pointing out the single flaw in it. This is TV debate, find some simplistic flaw in something, and then you can dismiss all of it, kind of, get way too much of that. And that is, more than anything else, what keeps us ignorant, is using that sort of binarism, and that binarism really forced upon us from an early age. Our teachers are authorities. This is right or wrong. You get an X or a C, and you get this mark on your you get a D, you get an F, that kind of stuff. And it's sort of imprinted on us that the nature of knowledge has no expansiveness to it. Every now and then you'll get a good teacher who's not really like that. I went to what would be called pretty good schools as a kid, and I had 2 or 3 okay and better than okay teachers. I had only 2 really good ones, and how long did I go to school for? I went to school for about 12 years. I had 2 really good teachers in there. I had some okay ones too, but ones that actually were mind-opening and made me excited to learn. I was kind of fortunate because at home, my parents shared information very differently from how they did at school. It wasn't cut and dried like that. It was, this this is because of this, My dad with music was really good on this stuff, but any subject actually, like he was interested in, history and culture and literature, whatever, he just was interested in everything. And he had his prejudices, he liked his sort of classical world, and classical in the sense of philosophy as well as music. And he tended to defend that and to see everything through that lens, but still he looked at things as opportunities to, this presents you, new information presents you with possibilities of altering your perspective and, developing wider understandings of things. And I think that's a good thing. And I try, even, old as I am now, to still have that same mentality. If somebody does something, and this isn't just, mostly it's music with me, but if it's something else, I try to get that too. It's like, they do that this way. They think about this, not the same way as I do. I'll ask people for suggestions, I'll be working on something and say, I'm having a hard time figuring out this part. And even if what they say they don't know anything about it and, their suggestions are, silly or whatever, it's still a way to get a different perspective on it. And so instead of just going, that's dumb, it's much better to say, what's behind that? What happens if we follow this one along? And where does that get to? And in a social sense, I suspect that that's a more tribal village way of communicating information rather than the hierarchic school version. And I suspect that's more healthy, and because learning is to one's advantage, And I love that because I left school, 17, I had to enter the workforce because, because, I left home too, had to make a life, right? And so your teachers then are greatly to your advantage. You have a boss on this crew and they show you how to do something, here's the good way to paint a floor, here's the good way to make this motor work, here's, this is how you frame a wall, all that stuff. It's always to your advantage to know those things. A, because, you get to keep your job, and B, because then you have a skill, and you have a skill some way, if you need money, you can get it because you know how to do something. And wouldn't it be cooler if our schools were much more about showing us how to do things, and instead of just, I don't know what's really in that, the sort of learn this stuff and then pass a test on it. I don't know what that teaches anybody, Sometimes I would sort of get a certain subject, for some really odd reason I was very good at chemistry, I had no real interest in it. I just kind of got it. I understood the pictures and I was really good at it, but it meant absolutely nothing to me, so I ended up forgetting it all as soon as the class was over. But I aced everything in it anyhow, I just think that the more we teach one another and get it into about how to do things instead of like, I know about this and you don't, you know. The more we get it into like, oh, how to, this was how I thought up to do this, this is how I did it. Doesn't mean you have to do it that way or anything like that. It's just like, this is a solution to this problem. The more that we share those amongst ourselves, I think the more, we'll all learn, and the more we'll be like empowered and stuff like that, rather than, I really hate the, I know this and you don't, or like, I know this and you don't, so whatever I think is better than what you think. I really hate that paradigm. Anyhow, I don't know why that is on my mind today, but it is.